Good morning. For any charity, there are special challenges in reaching out to members of ethnic minority groups, arguably, especially so for those aiming to support the older people in the community. Welcome to the third in a series of later life conversations hosted by HUK Norwich. I'm Pete Kelly, a retired journalist volunteering with the charity, and with us today to discuss these issues is Sam Apeh, the Community and Neighbourhood Support Manager for HUK Norwich, who runs its wide-ranging programme of social activities and also a one-to-one befriending scheme to tackle loneliness. Dee Robinson was the founder and until recently projects coordinator for New Roots Integration, a charity which supports ethnic minority groups in the city of Norwich. It works with refugees, asylum seekers and other immigrant communities. Robert Manning is the co-chair of New Roots Integration and has worked with refugees, asylum seekers and other immigrant communities for more than 10 years. He holds a PhD and has also been lecturing at the University of East Anglia. So Dee, maybe we could start with you and ask, what is the biggest challenge in reaching out to older members of ethnic minorities?
Language. I think older people often become very dependent on younger members of their families or communities because language acquisition is so much harder when you're older. Engagement's been particularly challenging during the last 18 months or so when everything's been online, and some older people don't feel comfortable or haven't got the skills or technology to access online sessions. These people tell me they really miss social interactions and their language skills have noticeably deteriorated over the months of confinement with only same language speakers. Luckily, communication isn't entirely dependent on language. A smile goes a long way to making people feel comfortable. Words can be built very slowly, one at a time, using body language and pictures to clarify. Too fast or too complex, and words are just noise. When that happens, the connection between you is lost, and it can be frustrating and very alienating. Even in face-to-face learning groups, older people often learn at a much slower pace than other members of the class, which can feel humiliating when every week you're learning the same thing over again, you understand it for the duration of the class, and then whoomp, it's gone again. I know that feeling. So it's really important to build a relationship of trust, being sensitive to moments of incomprehension and finding other ways to ensure engagement with each individual. It's very easy to inadvertently exclude the supposedly hard to reach older ethnic minorities by communicating solely with more language competent speakers in families or communities, rather than engaging directly. So over the long months of lockdown, I've been regularly telephoning a small group of the most isolated elderly participants, so they know they're not forgotten. When government guidelines and information is circulated, they're included in group texts, and then they can ask family or community members to translate rather than people just assuming someone's going to tell them. I do think there's a need for older people to interact with other senior members of the community, and I'd suggest that HUK would be well placed to run language or craft sessions where skills could be shared and learned across different cultural communities. Things such as coffee mornings are fine if you share the same language, but they really don't work for groups of different language speakers. An activity where you can show rather than tell is definitely more engaging for people.
That's very interesting, yeah. So, how do you find that, Sam? Are you finding that language is an issue in your groups?
Yes, so I think for us, yes, language is a big issue, but also Age UK Norwich as an organisation is more. I think most people think of it as a British-only organisation for some reason. There is this feeling, or I don't know how to say it, but in people's minds that, oh, it's only the British people that we support. So that is a challenge, and we've had to take proactive steps to combat that. By doing a whole lot of things, which I believe we'll come to later on. But that is a challenge on its own. And yes, language is a barrier because we have got people through some of our services, like the information and advice, for example, that need some advice on certain things that we've not been able to offer. Or we've really struggled because you'd need to then get an interpreter, etc., etc. And like, I agree with what Dee said around having somewhere where people can learn the language in a very relaxed, informal way. And that's why I believe you have organizations like Neighbourhood and the others to support us, because they are professionals, I guess, in that. And I think it's about organizations working together to achieve things as well. So yeah, language is a big one, but also I feel people might just feel not included in some of the things we used to do before as well. And maybe things that the way we used to put things out, like our marketing materials, etc., used to only project a certain kind of people that we support, which wasn't the case. So that also was a barrier, but I think so far things are beginning to improve by working in partnership.
So even just the faces you see on the leaflets and things like that.
Yeah, so faces you see on the leaflets, the kind of words we use as well. You know, some of those things are really telling, and I believe there are a lot of things we can improve on. We've talked about language and the fact that we only use the English language for all our leaflets. So if we're looking to be inclusive, etc., then we might consider other options, other languages, other inclusive languages and words. And there's a lot of work that goes into being inclusive and opening it up to ethnic minorities, definitely.
So Robert, that's interesting. When Sam is saying there's a lot more to inclusivity than we sometimes imagine. I mean, what do you see as the biggest challenge in the work you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with what Dee and Sam have both said about the language and also ensuring that information is accessible. I myself am quite conscious that there's people who we aren't reaching. Sometimes people have never accessed services before. Perhaps they came at a working age and then retired since being here, or have come and just do not know what support is out there for them. So in effect, they're not actually seeking help because they don't know there is any to be found. And I see that as one of the problems of reaching out to older people. It's also quite difficult because as charities, we rely on our funders, and very often it's slightly easy. No funding is easy to get, but it's slightly easier to get funding for a particular project that's running, whereas it's not as easy to get funding to research into the local area and see if there's any people who aren't accessing the services and why. But yeah, obviously language can be the biggest barrier to all of this, really, I think.
So there's an issue of people you just aren't reaching at the moment, partly because almost by definition you don't know they're there. Is that something like that? Because of the inability to fund research, it's difficult to know who you should be reaching. Would you say that?
Yes, yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, I also just feel some of the people coming into the country, for example, those who haven't lived here for long enough, they also don't know and I think that's kind of also what Robert, just adding to what Robert was saying, they don't know what the infrastructure is, what is available, like Robert says, and then if we look at language as a massive barrier, they can't find out what is available because the language barrier is already there. So only things that they are offered on arrival that they're aware of. So unless you have someone that is really experienced in supporting ethnic minorities, also have a good understanding of the services in the local area, you'd have someone that just gets one type of support and that's it. And they just manage on that because for whatever reason, they would clearly not understand the infrastructure of the UK, of Norwich, where to go, all of that kind of thing. So it is a big area as well.
I mean, I think asylum seekers are mainly brought to new routes and then they are told about what's available. But there are a lot of ethnic minorities who have come to new routes through other routes of access. And some people who have lived in the city for decades and never leave their houses because they don't know how to use the bus, they don't speak any English, and gradually word has got to these people in the communities and they're coming out of their houses and accessing some of the activities, or they were before lockdown. And I think that's a really good sign that, you know, word of mouth is probably the strongest way of getting people to services. But I think Age UK is in a very unique position because even though there are other organisations that provide information, it's generic information, and they would provide information that's relevant to older people. But if they could be signposted to Age UK, I don't know if Age UK has access to interpreters, then there could be a lot of sort of wraparound care offered. So they could, by seeking information, they could then find out about other services that Age UK could offer, or Age UK could find out what they might like.
It's very much a service that aims to tailor itself to individuals, isn't it, Sam? I know that sounds right.
Yes, it's all individual, and but I think it's our responsibility as an organization to look at the whole picture, and hence why I mentioned we've had to take a lot of steps and actions recently, and that was born out of looking at the whole picture. How can we improve things? How can we reach out to more people, ethnic minorities? How can we make our groups in the community, for example, a lot diverse than it is at the moment? How can we engage more people? Lots of things like that. And it's about services we provide, making sure they are also inclusive. So a good example is having people come around and talk about immigration and things like that. So if all the people in the community know that, oh, you can talk about immigration at Age UK, and they can maybe help you with the first stage and send you to where you'd get more information and more support, then you can get more people coming through from ethnic minority groups. So those kind of things I feel are really important to break the barriers and challenges people go through to accessing services.
So, Robert, I know you've been doing this for at least 10 years. And I'm wondering, is the situation improving, would you say, in somewhere like Norwich? I mean, clearly, I imagine we've got a long way to go, but
yes, it's definitely improving. There's always more to be done, but it is certainly improving. In the time that I've been working in Norwich, I think I've worked in Norwich for over 20 years. It's certainly, thankfully, a lot more multicultural now, and with the increase in immigrant populations, there has been an increase in the services that are offered. There's certainly a lot more shops for people to be able to get goods that they perhaps weren't able to get before. The city is also providing a lot more services that create awareness. We have Refugee Week in June, and Black History Month as well. And Norwich is actually a city of sanctuary. So there's work being done to improve services all around the city. So yes, I think that there's still a lot more that can be done and should be done, but it has improved in my memory of the last 20 years anyway.
Dee, I know earlier on you were saying that you felt people were coming out a bit more, perhaps as a result of word of mouth. Do you see the picture generally improving, or or not?
Oh, yes. I mean, in 2003, when dispersal of asylum seekers began, people were visibly very different from local people, where local people were predominantly white, their clothes were very British and colourless, and you hardly ever heard another language spoken. I mean, I moved up from London and I used to go and talk to the kebab shop owners just because I was so homesick from foreign accents. You know, I wasn't used to all this Englishness. And there were, as Robert said, there were very few shops that catered to diverse cooking requirements. But Norwich feels much more alive and connected to the rest of the world now. Of course, the downside of greater diversity is there is a higher incidence of racism and racist crime, sadly, particularly since Brexit.
That's increased, has it? Yeah.
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 I mean, I don't know any hijab wearer who hasn't been spat at in the street, which is absolutely dreadful. And those things need to be tackled head on. But yes, it's much more vibrant and people don't feel so alone. You know, they can walk around the street and see other people who look like them and can wave and make friends.
Yeah, that's so Sam, I see you're nodding along to all of that. What do you think?
Yes, no, 100%. I came to Norwich in 2011 when my parents moved from Essex, and I mean, compared to what it is now, it is a lot more diverse and a lot more accepting of ethnic minorities. I remember the first day I walked down the Anglia Square Road after moving down, and it was like everyone was looking at me. That's how I felt. And compared to now, I mean, I can walk around Norwich feeling really comfortable. So it's a lot different and a lot more accepting. And I think it's down to obviously immigration. A lot of ethnic minorities are coming down this way, but also it shows that people are also a lot more open now, and if people don't feel comfortable living in a place, they'd move on. So I guess people are moving here and remaining here because they feel comfortable, which is really a positive thing. And I must say, because obviously I've been part of Neighbourhood as well over the years, and I know that they've done a lot of good work over the years to increase that. To talk about diversity, to promote cohesion in the community, all of that, which today we're seeing the results of it. And yeah, from my own experience, personal experience, it's 100% changed significantly, positively as well, I'd say.
I find it fascinating. I mean, I've lived here for about 40 years, but it's fascinating to hear that it's improved that much just in 10 years. Just in terms of the experience in the street. That's interesting. Yeah. Robert, you're nodding to that as well. I mean, that's like I said. I mean, what I'm interested in as well is what do you think organisations, other charities and things are getting right about this? What are sort of good examples of what we're doing now and what we can do even further to improve things, would you say? What are we getting right at the moment?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that charities like Mind and Age UK, especially, they are talking to us about what they can do and also sharing information with us. So I think that there are charities that are doing their best to improve things. There's as I said in the last topic, that there is also a lot more that can be done, but it is interesting to see certain charities are liaising with other groups and networking and sharing information, which I think is very important to be able to understand what needs to be done to assist migrant communities.
So it sounds as if you're saying that charities working together is a big part of it. And
Yes.
other organisations, yeah. And Dee, what would you say? I mean, in terms of what people are getting right now, what would you say?
Yeah, I think working together is really, really important, and sharing and not being in competition with one another. I mean, the Norwich Integration Partnership has been really successful, and it's been held up as a model across the UK for good partnership working. I think in terms of elderly people, you know, the dance exercise class that New Roots ran with Age UK was really successful, because that wasn't a class that required much conversation between people. So it was really great having local people and ethnic minorities, and it was almost entirely elderly people coming to that. It'd be great if that can continue. But I think English classes for elderly people might be a good idea if Age UK were able to do that, because elderly people do learn at a different pace, and sometimes their language requirements are quite different from people who are looking for jobs and talking to teachers at school. Actually, you know, older people like to have what my friends and I called an organ recital, you know, where you're talking about your ailments and you've got somebody to talk to, and you don't want to talk to younger members of the community who might find such things laughable, you know, that you can't hear as well as you used to and you don't move around as well as you used to. It's great to have, you know, older friends that you can talk to about those things. So I think it would be really nice to have an older group where those things can be discussed, and you're learning the language as well, and learning about how people do things in different countries.
Yeah.
I love the idea that the language class might want to focus on helping people to talk about their bad leg and things like that.
Well, it's very important if you've got a bad leg to be able to talk about
it. Sam, you were saying earlier on that you referred to the things Age UK is doing, and you wanted to say a bit more about that, I think, a bit later in the conversation. In this area,
Yeah, no, we've done. I think in the last 2 years, we have tried as much as possible to reach out to more ethnic groups. We've worked with New Roots, and Dee mentioned about the dance classes we set up. I can say, I mean, as at 2 years ago, our community groups were attended by 100% white British people. And I think when we carried out just before COVID, we carried out a review of our groups, just monitoring the diversity of it, and we had gone up 12%. So, and that came as a result of obviously working with organizations. Hence why I really advocate for partnership working as much as possible, because from my experience, ethnic minorities normally feel comfortable, especially when you've recently migrated to a new location. You feel comfortable knowing that, oh, I belong to this place, and they build that kind of trust as well. So I think organizations like New Roots, like Bridge Plus, and some other ones in the community, they're really good at doing that, at being that first kind of organization that people can trust, and working with them would obviously give us access to more ethnic minorities and promote our services. So we've worked really well with them, and that we've seen that impact in that survey that we conducted, that diversity survey. But also we've looked at the way we market our services, promote our services. So we've revamped our flyers, the wordings we use on them as well. Lots of work had gone into ensuring that it covers, we have pictures, for example, of ethnic minorities in them, to show that, yes, this is something you can be part of as well. All of that you can easily overlook, but they are all information, they are messages that people take on. So if I pick up a flyer and I see an ethnic minority person, it's more likely that I'd have connection to it than when it's not. It's unfortunately that's the reality of things. And so those are some of the things we've also done, but we are looking at new ways of working together, and the English class, like Dee mentioned, might be a good thing to do as well. We are looking to restart lots of groups now that the lockdown has been relaxed or removed, and hopefully in the future we can do something like that, because if language is a major barrier, then maybe we will be able to set up something to kind of combat that and remove that barrier for people.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Robert, I wonder if you're finding this. I mean, what I'm hearing is that sometimes you need to start with a group which is focused on a particular ethnic community, like I suppose perhaps a Polish community or a Chinese community group, and work with them initially. Do you find that to build the trust?
Is that to Robert?
Sorry, it was, yeah, but Dee, perhaps, are you finding?
Yeah, I feel that, I mean, we never, at New Roots, we never worked with a single nationality. That actually they have their community that they trust. And the first step in integration is to make bridges with other communities. People within communities can translate. I mean, we've run health and sexual relationship workshops for new arrivals. And again, the most important thing is that kind of intercultural discussion, so that people feel more comfortable about letting go of their preconceived ideas about things, because it's not just the way I've always done things and the way things are being done in the UK. It's seen in a much more global context. Oh, they do things that way in that country and a completely different way in another country, and in that third country, they think something else. So everything's open for discussion rather than things being fixed. And I think as soon as you're working with one nationality and one set of assumptions, you're actually hindering integration.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting, yeah.
And that the trust needs to be built between one community and another. So once you've got trust between two communities that share the experience of resettlement, it's easier for people from those communities then to make another step into a new community that maybe doesn't have that shared experience of resettlement, because you've already made that jump out of your community.
I see you're nodding to that, Robert. Clearly something
Yes,
that,
sorry if I repeat anything. My connection is quite bad. I keep drifting in and out.
you're here now.
I heard most of what Dee said, and I think, yes, at New Roots we don't separate the communities, because we are all about New Roots integration, and therefore enabling people to make friends and form connections that that they desperately need after perhaps coming to this country and then being quite isolated. So yes, we don't separate the groups. I can actually see how it could work with specific small things, but as a whole, it's better for all of the people to be together, I think, and they appreciate that more as well. It's very educational for everyone concerned to learn about other cultures.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, so we're coming towards the end of our time. So I'm just wondering if I could ask each of you if you had one message for members of older members of ethnic minorities, what would it be? Maybe Sam, we start with you. Give us the others a chance to think about it.
What I'll say is simply it's easy to feel like you don't belong to somewhere. It's easy to feel left out, especially when you've not grown in that place, you've not lived many years. It's also and by doing that, you start excluding yourself or isolating yourself from the general public, from services, etc. So always feel all the people are always welcome at Age UK Norwich. If you're unsure, give us a call. We will always look for a way to support. We've talked about language. If the language is a problem, we'll always look for a way around it. And we will also be able to support you. Even if we can't provide the support ourselves, we'll be able to refer you on to somewhere where you'd get support. So yeah, please get in touch with us, and don't feel like you don't belong, because you belong. And as long as you're in the UK, I think we all want and enjoy supporting each other. So that will be my main message. Don't feel like you don't belong, because it's easy to feel that way sometimes.
That's excellent. Okay. Perhaps go to Robert while you're still with us as well. Oh, God. Are you there? Are you there, Robert?
Yes, I am now. Sorry, it's been a dreadful connection.
What was your one message, please?
Yes, I think I heard most of what Sam said, and I would agree that it applies to New Routes as well. Just get in touch. You'd be very welcome. We might not always provide services that are exactly the best fit to you, but we're willing to listen. And then if there's more people who want that service, then we can look into getting it set up. We try and be participant led as much as possible. So just get in touch. That's the main thing.
Okay. Dee, over to you.
I'd say get out of your house. There's a whole world out there.